Greetings, my dear friends. This is Chax with a new episode of Chax Simplifies. China is a large country, among the largest in the world, covering an area of approximately 9.6 million square kilometers, a population of just over 1.4 billion people, blessed by geography, and some may say even cursed by geography. It boundaries 16 different countries. It was called the Middle Kingdom. Today, it is, however, in the middle of all global disputes. This episode is to go into the areas of what is the rationale by which China is in the middle of so many disputes globally. What are these disputes? And why is it that has happened now? Why now? This episode was working out to be far too long, and therefore I have divided this into two parts. Part 1, we will briefly look at the major border disputes that China has with its neighbors, including the South China Sea, and go into very briefly again the historical background. In the second part, I'll go into the areas that will answer the question, why now? What has prompted China to jump the gun now? So let's get on with it. The essential question is essentially, disputes have been China's calling card. China has used history and the maps very creatively. Let us look at the historical and the Chinese perspective to understand this better. I will go around the history, the geography of China clockwise, starting from the Russia or the old Soviet Union. China quotes the Qing dynasty, which got into treaties with Imperial Russia, as unequal. In deference to Chinese sensibilities, the Soviet Union returned all territories annexed by it to the Communist China in 1945. However, one area, the area of the three rivers in the east, remained, and China and the Soviet Union went on a 7-month-long undeclared war in March 1969. The border agreement was finally signed on the 14th of October 2003, and was assumed this border now is dormant. Well, surprise! China on the 2nd of July 2020 claimed Vladivostok. It said it was the king's Manchurian homeland and annexed by the Russian Empire in 1860 after China was defeated in the Second Opium War. Really? Let's get to Taiwan. Taiwan is a very controversial and a complex issue. The Chinese Civil War ended in 1949, and the leadership of Kuomintang retreated to Taiwan, also called the Republic of China. The communists who won remained in mainland China, which was renamed People's Republic of China, or PRC. The transfer of administration of Taiwan to mainland China happened after the Second World War in the Treaty of San Francisco. Relations between Beijing and Taipei have been characterized by limited contact, tensions, and instability. There were two stints of war: the first Taiwan crisis in 1954 and the second Taiwan Strait crisis in 1958. Till 1971, the Republic of China was recognized as the legitimate government of China and Taiwan by most NATO countries. The People's Republic of China was recognized as the China by the Soviet bloc countries, the non-aligned countries, and some Western countries like the United Kingdom and Netherlands. The PRC of People's Republic of China maintains one China policy and insists that it is the legitimate China and therefore Taiwan is only a province. However, the US continues to arm Taiwan. There's an annual ritual of firepower display and drills by the public, by the PRC, and defensive exercises by the ROC. Taiwan has been having free elections. It refuses to bow to the PRC. China threatens to take over Taiwan militarily. And in Jan 2020, President Tsai Ing-wen said Taiwan is an independent country called the Republic of China, Taiwan. Beijing must face this reality. The nation, the PRC, the ROC has also determined that it will issue passports which will have the name of only Taiwan and not even the ROC. With Japan, the Senkaku Islands in the East China Sea, a group of 5 uninhabited islands and 3 rocks of size approximately 4.3 square kilometers ranging down to 800 square meters is the issue which is causing problems. China claims these as it discovered them in the 14th century and used as navigation markers. However, they were controlled by Japan since 1895. The ownership was taken over by the United States and was transferred back to Japan in 1972. This gave China a handle to enter into a dispute. The discovery of oil and gas further created reasons why China must intervene. These islands are close to the key shipping lanes and are rich fishing grounds. China unilaterally set up the East China Aircraft Identification Zone, and this was objected by Japan. Now, Japanese and Chinese ships and fishing fleets have a virtually everyday confrontation. China also had issues with North Korea. Surprised? So was I. The historical significance is that of the Peketu Mountain, a volcanic mountain believed to be the spiritual origin of the Korean kingdom. In 1962, they signed a border agreement agreeing to share the mountain, the lake at its peak, and North Korea controlling approximately 54% of the mountain. South Korean groups do not accept this and they feel that China is attempting to take over the entire mountain. They regard the entire mountain as Korean territory given away by North Korea. North Korea, incidentally, is a client state of China, and therefore presently there is no problem. With South Korea, although there is no direct boundary, there is a maritime boundary. 2 issues here. The delineation of waters of the Yellow Sea. If you go by the UNCLOS principle of 200 nautical miles of EEZ, and when these EEZs are together, they crisscross each other, then the center line is what is accepted as the EEZ. South Korea wants the EEZ between China and itself to be delineated as per the UNCLOS. China says, oh no, this line should be proportional, taking into consideration China's larger population and longer coastline. It wants to subvert the UNCLOS. Socotra Rock is another area which comes into the jurisdiction of South Korea. South Korea has maintained a presence since 1950s. In 2003, it constructed an ocean research station. Thereafter, in 2016, the United States and South Korea jointly developed the THAAD, Terminal High Altitude Air Defense System, and positioned it here in response to the nuclear and missile threats of North Korea as a purely defensive strategy aimed at North Korea. China has also extended its aircraft identification zone into here, and it claims that nothing should be built here because it is still disputed. Uneasy calm prevails. Spratly Islands are a matter of dispute between China, Taiwan, Malaysia, Philippines, Vietnam, and Brunei. They are important because of the fact that almost one-third of the world's shipping crosses here, approximately $5.3 trillion worth. Potentially significant but unexplored oil and gas has been found here. $11 billion of oil, 190 trillion cubic feet of gas. It's among the most productive areas for world fishing, and approximately 10% of the world's fishing is here. Anyone who controls the Spratly Islands will in effect control the South China Sea. China began dredging activities in 2014. In 2015, it rapidly constructed an airfield on the Fairy Cross Reef and continued reclamation activities in 5 other sites. Philippines, Malaysia, Brunei all claim areas of the South China Sea as a part of EEZ under UNCLOS. China says its claim is predominant as it was decreed by the 9-dash line, a series of 9 dashes drawn by Chaing Kai Shek at one time. Philippines' claim was upheld by the arbitration tribunal under UNCLOS in 2016. However, China refuses to acknowledge the same. Currently, there is stalemate. Military is employed to occupy disputed territory and advance territorial gains. Skirmishes between Chinese Navy, Vietnam, Philippines, Malaysia continue. As recently as a few weeks back, the United States sent 3 carrier task forces into the Pacific, including 2 in the South China Sea, for what is called as freedom of navigation patrols. The ASEAN, for the first time, has called upon all actors, read China, to act as per UNCLOS, rejecting all Chinese claims based on the 9-dash line. China and Vietnam share a terrestrial border which saw a war in 1979. This war was the last war fought by the PLA, the People's Liberation Army of China, and it suffered defeat. This border was settled largely in 1990. However, the maritime border was never settled. These are the areas of Gulf of Tonkin and the South China Sea. The dispute, if you recollect, we did speak about the Spratly and the Paracel Islands and some of the territorial waters. Vietnam controlled these islands, some part of them, since the 17th century, and some of these areas were handed over to it by the French when they vacated the French Indochina. China and Vietnam, when they were having a problem, Laos got into it, and Vietnam's invasion of Cambodia gave China a reason why it should start teaching Vietnam a lesson. Sadly, it learnt a lesson here. However, in 1992, an agreement was signed between China and Laos delineating their common border, and this is presently peaceful. With Indonesia, while there is no terrestrial boundary, the maritime boundary exists. And this is an area which overlaps Indonesia's EEZ near the Natuna Islands. China acknowledges Indonesia's sovereignty over the Natuna Islands, but it says the waters around the Natuna Islands are traditional fishing grounds for the Chinese and therefore it must have them. Indonesia does not accept this. China sends fishing boats escorted by their Coast Guard ships, and in retaliation, Indonesia has set up a naval base called the Ranai. Uneasy calm prevails. Myanmar and China share a history. During the Chinese Civil War, some of the Kuomintang withdrew into China and continued to fight. In 1954, the nationalist government in Taiwan withdrew the surviving Kuomintang force. However, many ardent nationalists refused, and as late as early 1960s, this force had reached a strength of 10,000 troops. China and then man called Burma fought these nationalists together, and Zhou Enlai and Nguyen signed a border treaty in 1960. Interestingly, this is the McMahon line and accepted as the border. However, the same McMahon line is not accepted as the border when it comes to India. There is uneasy calm here, and Myanmar regularly accuses China of arming the Arakan Army, which is a terrorist organization, as well as the Tang National Liberation Army. With Bhutan, China has a border of 470 kilometers. However, no diplomatic relations. Bhutan has no history of being under the suzerainty of China or even Britain for that matter. Chinese claims on Bhutanese territories were first made by Mao Zedong when he declared the correct borders of China will include Burma, Bhutan, and Nepal. The 5 fingers of the Tibet policy includes Bhutan as a part of Tibet and therefore China. 4 areas essentially in 2016 were called disputed. These were in the west of Bhutan at Doklam, covering 89 square kilometers, at Sinuchupla and Geu, which cover about 180 square kilometers. In the June of 2017, India, China and Bhutan had the Doklam standoff, which was resolved finally in the August. As recently as last month, China raised a new dispute, giving and saying that the Sekting Wildlife Sanctuary in Bhutan's eastern Tashigang district is its. Interestingly, there is no contiguous border of China with this area. Effectively, it is reclaiming Arunachal or parts of Arunachal so that it can get access to this area. Central idea is to keep India off guard. With Nepal, China shares a 1,439 kilometer long border. This was demarcated by surveyors of both countries in 1963, and they settled the border with the exception of 3 boundary pillars in Dolaka and 2 pillars near Everest. However, there are recent reports that China has occupied some villages in the North Nepal. China recently claimed all of Mount Everest as its own territory. And it is believed that the Lipu Lake issue between India and Nepal has been instigated by China. With Tajikistan, China claims historical claims all over again back to the Qing dynasty of between 1644 and 1912. It kept quiet till there was the Soviet Union, and after its breakup started making noises. Established bilateral relations with Tajikistan and in 2011 came to a very one-sided treaty settling the centuries-old border disputes. Tajikistan ceded 1,158 square kilometers to China. With Mongolia, it has had a troubled relationship lasting thousands of years. The Great Wall of China was constructed to ward off the Mongols in 221 BC. Incidentally, the Han Chinese have their origins as Mongols. There have been skirmishes between China and the USSR, and in 1949, China recognized Mongolia. Mongolia remains very suspicious of China, and it feels that China can dig up old maps from somewhere and reclaim areas and will look to resettle its growing population in Mongolia. Now let's come to India. The issues with India are in three areas. Two large areas, the Aksai Chin, the Arunachal, and in the central part, about 8 different pockets. Let's take them one by one. Starting with the north, the Aksai Chin. It's one of these two large disputed areas. The first reference to Aksai Chin is made in Vishnu Purana, volume 9, where it describes of the Samudra Manthan. Aksai China is a place whose sign is immortal. India claims Aksai Chin as its easternmost part of the Union Territory of Ladakh. China claims it as a part of the Xinjiang and Tibet. The line that separates these two countries today is known as the Line of Actual Control, or the LAC. Well, speaking of lines, traditionally there were two lines that were drawn. The boundary lines is what I'm talking about this time. The Johnson line, which was first drawn in 1865 by William Johnson when he was attached with the Survey of India. This was modified in 1897 by Sir John Ardagh, who wanted the boundary to be along the Karakoram range, and this was called as the Johnson-Ardagh line. Thereafter, in 1899, McCartney MacDonald proposed a new line. This line used the Karakoram Mountains as the natural border, set up British boundaries up to the Indus River, and left the Tarim River and its watershed in Chinese control. This line was presented to the Chinese. The Qing government did not respond. The British continued the confusion and used both the Johnson line and the MacDonald line till about 1930s. Thereafter, it started using only the Johnson line. The Soviet officials who surveyed Aksai Chin in 1940 went by the Johnson line. India also continued with the Johnson line. As late as July 1954, Nehru wrote a memo directing that all maps of India should be revised to show a definite boundary on all frontiers. Up to this point, the boundary in Aksai Chin was based on the Johnson line and was described as undemarcated. Between 1951 and 57, China built the 1,200 kilometer long road connecting Xinjiang to Western Tibet. This road ran along south of the Johnson line through the Aksai Chin claimed by India. India did not know the existence of this road till 1957 and then started making noise. China said the border has never been delimited, therefore we will accept the MacDonald line because that's the only line that was presented to us. The 1962 war was probably among the reasons was the axis between Xinjiang and Tibet. Let's get to Arunachal Pradesh. The British first annexed Assam as a part of the First Anglo-Burmese War, and thereafter the entire Burma. In 1913 and 1914, representatives of Britain, China, and Tibet attended a conference in Shimla and drew up an agreement concerning Tibet's status and borders. McMahon Line was proposed as the boundary here, going by the principles of the fact that south of Himalayas was India, and they used the watershed principle to determine where the line should lie. This was initialed by all three, but Beijing reneged. British and Tibetan negotiators continued and signed the Shimla Convention, right? But China argues that this convention was illegal. McMahon Line was illegal because the Tibetan government was only a local government not given treaty-making powers. The McDonald Line itself does not adhere to the watershed principle. Its language is vague, open to interpretation. For example, India included the Thagla Ridge, Longju, and Kinsamane as Indian territories. In 1962, fighting actually started north of the McMahon Line. However, post the war of 1962, China unilaterally withdrew to where they perceived the boundary was, and there have been skirmishes after that. The last of them in October 1975 at Tulungla, where 4 Indian soldiers were killed. At Sikkim, we have had the Nathula and the Chola clashes in 1967. Thereafter, India also altered the LAC so that it could take advantage of the ridge lines. The stretch of 545 kilometers along the states of Himachal and Uttar Pradesh up to Bhutan is the central section, least complicated of the three. However, China claims about 2,000 square kilometers across 8 small separate blobs. This is comparatively stable, though China keeps asserting its presence and claims. The latest is, at the instigation of China, the Lipulue incident raked up by the Nepal. Chinese approach to the border disputes has been simple and absolutely unparalleled. It is cartographic aggression in no small means. The China picks up an old map and suits its hegemonic aspirations, ambitions to claim whatever it wants. Practically, they've all the time tried to expand their territory. Russia, Pakistan, the Tajiks, even in the South China Sea, most countries have accepted. The Vietnamese fought back and gave Chinese Liberation Army a bloody nose. They kept quiet there. Taiwan did exactly that. They keep rattling sabers, but nothing really has happened. Japan is taking a firm stand, and today, so is India. Chinese do not follow global ethics or norms. They do not adhere to treaties or conventions. Take a look at the UNCLOS, which they are a signatory and they have not accepted. India is one of the significant powers in the region. China quotes historical maps to suit their narrative. If that be so, India can claim most of China, or the Britain can claim most of the world. So therefore, it leaves us to the second part and a lead in there. If disputes have been China's calling card, why has China escalated now? Is China sensing an opportunity, or is it feeling threatened? We will examine these issues in the second part of Chack Simplifies China, the Middle Kingdom, or middle of all global disputes. Thank you. Have a great day.